Last night started like any other evening with my friends. It was a Friday, and after a long week, I was excited to unwind and enjoy some quality time together. My buddies and I had decided to have a gaming night, firing up the PS5 for some multiplayer action. We had snacks laid out, drinks chilling, and laughter filled the air as we settled in for a fun night. My wife, Lila, usually kept to herself when my friends were over. She wasn't the type to interrupt our hangouts. She'd often retreat to the bedroom or another part of the house, which was fine by me. I respected her choice to stay out of the chaos, and my friends appreciated the space as well. But this time, things would take an unexpected turn. Lila had been in the shower when my friends arrived. She had planned to come out later, but in a hurry to find her phone. She emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel. It was a scene I didn't expect, and I felt a mix of surprise and unease as I watched her enter the living room. Her hair was still damp, and I could see she was just as startled to find my friends there as they were to see her. The moment was brief but loaded. As she bent over to grab her phone, which was charging underneath our TV stand, the towel shifted slightly, exposing more of her than I'm sure she intended. I could see my friend's eyes widen in shock, a mix of surprise and awkwardness settling in. They quickly diverted their gazes, pretending to focus on the game as Lila retrieved her phone. It was all over in seconds, but the impact of that moment lingered heavily in the air. As soon as she returned to the bedroom, I followed her. I felt a knot forming in my stomach, a mix of embarrassment and irritation. When I confronted her about it, she shrugged it off, saying it was no big deal and that she didn't think anyone would care. But I did care. I could feel the weight of the awkwardness settling over our friends and me. I tried to explain how I felt, emphasizing that having her come out in just a towel around my friends was inappropriate. It wasn't about her body or her confidence, it was about respect for boundaries. Especially when it came to our friends. I felt uncomfortable knowing that they had seen her like that, even if it was just for a fleeting moment. Her response surprised me. She didn't understand why I was making such a fuss over something she viewed as harmless. "Who cares if they saw?" she said. And I could see that she genuinely didn't grasp the gravity of the situation. To her, it was just her being natural. But to me, it felt like a violation of the unspoken rules we had established in our relationship. That night, the atmosphere among my friends shifted. They had joked about the incident in our group chat later, playfully teasing me about the situation. "Hey, we owe you one," they said, laughter lacing their messages. I couldn't help but feel a mix of embarrassment and frustration. It was like they were trivializing something that felt significant to me, reducing it to a punchline. Lila, on the other hand, was visibly upset. I could see her frustration growing as she felt I was overreacting. She kept bringing it up, trying to convince me that I was being unreasonable. It was just a towel, she insisted, her voice tinged with annoyance. But to me, it wasn't just about the towel. It was about our relationship and how we navigated our boundaries. The following days were filled with tension. Lila and I would sit in the same room, but there was a palpable distance between us. I could sense her irritation, and I was frustrated with her inability to see my side. We had always been a couple that communicated well, but this felt different. It was as if we were speaking entirely different languages, unable to connect. I tried to move on from the incident, but it continued to hang over us like a dark cloud. Whenever I brought up our friends or our plans for the week, I could see her bristle, reminding me of that night. I felt guilty for making her upset, but I also felt justified in my feelings. I didn't want my friends to think poorly of our relationship or see my wife in a way that was meant for my eyes only. In the days that followed, I made a conscious effort to reassure her. I wanted her to know that I loved her and appreciated her confidence. But I also needed her to understand my perspective. I suggested we create clearer boundaries about what was appropriate when friends were around. But each time I approached the subject, it seemed to reignite the tension. Eventually, I sought advice from friends who were also married. I wanted to hear how they navigated similar situations, hoping for insight into how to bridge the gap between Lila and me. Many of them agreed that communication was key, but they also cautioned me about how to express my feelings without making her feel attacked. Armed with this advice, I decided to try again. One quiet evening, I took Lila out for dinner at our favorite restaurant, hoping the change of scenery would help us reconnect. I chose a cozy corner table, where the atmosphere felt intimate and relaxed. As we sipped our drinks and reminisced about happier times, I broached the subject once more. I carefully articulated my feelings, ensuring that I framed it from a place of love. I emphasized how much I appreciated her openness and confidence but reiterated that our relationship had its own set of boundaries. I reminded her of the importance of mutual respect, especially when it came to our friends. To my relief, she listened intently this time, her expression softening as she processed my words. While I couldn't erase the memory of that night, I hope we could work towards understanding each other better. I could see a flicker of understanding in her eyes, a recognition of the discomfort I felt. Though it was a step in the right direction, I knew we still had a long way to go. As the weeks passed, things gradually improved. We both made an effort to communicate openly and honestly about our feelings. I tried to be more mindful of my reactions, and Lila began to appreciate the importance of boundaries in our relationship. I could feel the tension lift, and it felt as if we were rebuilding our connection, one conversation at a time. In retrospect, that incident with the towel had opened the door to important discussions about our relationship. While it had been an embarrassing moment, it ultimately forced us to confront issues we had been avoiding. I learned that navigating boundaries in a relationship requires constant communication and understanding. As I reflected on the journey, I recognized that relationships are not always smooth sailing. They require effort, compromise, and the ability to address uncomfortable situations head-on. I felt grateful for the opportunity to grow together with Lila, and I was hopeful for our future. Looking back, I realized that sometimes it takes a moment of discomfort to spark meaningful change. Our relationship emerged stronger, and I cherished the love we had built over the years. In the end, the incident served as a reminder that love thrives in the spaces of trust, respect, and open communication.
I found myself sitting at the edge of a precipice, staring into the depths of my thoughts and fears. My fiancé, Mark, was everything I had ever dreamed of: kind, intelligent, and genuinely good-hearted. We had been engaged for about a month, a time filled with excitement and the promise of a beautiful future together. Yet, as much as I loved him, an unsettling thought began to creep into my mind: maybe I wasn't the right person for him. It all started when Tara, my sister, entered the picture. She was 27 and had always been the star of our family. Beautiful, confident, and undeniably magnetic, Tara turned heads wherever she went. I had always admired her from a distance. But now, in the shadow of my own engagement, I couldn't shake the feeling that she might be better suited for Mark. Tara and Mark got along effortlessly. At family gatherings, they shared laughter and stories, and it felt like a punch in the gut each time I witnessed their connection. My parents adored Tara, she was their favorite, and I felt like I was living in her shadow. When I introduced Mark to my family, I thought it would be a simple affair. Instead, it turned into a whirlwind of praise directed at him. And before I knew it, I was questioning my own worth. My mother often commented on how perfect Mark was, subtly suggesting he would make a great match for Tara. They have so much in common, she would say with a smile. And my heart would sink a little more each time. My dad, ever the jokester, even made light of the situation once, saying it was a shame Tara hadn't met someone like Mark sooner. They'd make a power couple, he quipped, and the laughter that followed felt like nails on a chalkboard. The more time Tara and Mark spent together, the more I felt like an outsider in my own life. They worked out at the same gym, attended similar professional events, and even found themselves bonding over shared interests. Whenever I offered to join them, Tara would wave me off, saying she only needed him for a quick favor. I could see the dynamic shifting, and it made my heart ache. The tipping point came during a family dinner a few weeks ago. Tara made a comment about how Mark was the perfect guy, and how any woman would be lucky to have him. My dad laughed and chimed in, "Well, there's still time for that," leaving the room filled with an uncomfortable silence. I could feel my cheeks flush with embarrassment and pain, while Mark's smile faltered. It was as if I had been thrust into a living nightmare. Watching my fears materialize in front of me, I spent countless nights tossing and turning, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. What if I was holding him back? What if my family was right, and he would be happier with someone like Tara? The idea burrowed itself deep into my mind, feeding my insecurities. I started to believe that I wasn't good enough for him, that my personality paled in comparison to Tara's vibrant charisma. As the days turned into weeks, I became increasingly convinced that stepping aside would be the best course of action for everyone involved. I didn't want to be the reason Mark felt trapped or unfulfilled. I loved him too much to let my insecurities ruin his chance at happiness. But the thought of breaking up with him filled me with dread. Would it be cruel to end our relationship? Especially when he was so kind and loving. I tried to push my thoughts aside, focusing instead on the love we shared. I reminded myself of all the moments that had brought us together, the quiet evenings spent cooking dinner, the spontaneous road trips, and the inside jokes that made us laugh until we cried. But every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Tara and Mark laughing together, sharing experiences that I felt excluded from. One particularly sleepless night, I decided to take action. I sat down with my journal, pouring out my thoughts and fears onto the pages. I wrote about my feelings of inadequacy, the pressure I felt from my family, and the nagging worry that I was somehow a burden to Mark. As I wrote, tears streamed down my face, soaking the pages. It was cathartic, but it also left me feeling more lost than ever. After many agonizing days of contemplation, I reached a decision. I would have to talk to Mark about how I felt. The fear of losing him weighed heavily on my heart. But I knew I couldn't continue pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I envisioned a conversation where I could express my feelings, where I could be honest about the doubts that plagued me. I planned the conversation for a quiet afternoon. I wanted it to be intimate, just the two of us. When the moment arrived, my heart raced as I looked into Mark's eyes, filled with love and warmth. I opened my mouth to speak, but my voice felt choked with emotion. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind so many times, but facing him was different. Finally, the words began to spill out. I shared my worries about Tara and how my family's comments had affected my self-esteem. I told him I felt like an outsider in my own relationship and that I feared he might be happier with someone like her. As I spoke, I watched the expressions shift across his face: concern, confusion, and finally, understanding. But instead of reassurance, he looked pained. He told me how much he loved me and how I was the one he wanted to be with, not Tara. He reassured me that our relationship meant everything to him. But as he spoke, I felt a twinge of guilt for even bringing this up. I was the one creating this divide, and he was fighting to hold on to something that felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Despite his comforting words, I couldn't shake the feeling that my insecurities were driving a wedge between us. The thought of leaving him weighed heavily on my heart. And yet, part of me felt it might be the only way for him to find true happiness. The days that followed were fraught with uncertainty. I tried to keep my distance from Tara, but it was difficult when we had so many mutual friends and family gatherings. Each interaction with her felt charged, as if everyone was silently comparing me to her. My family's expectations weighed down on me like a heavy cloak, and I found myself retreating further into my insecurities. As I navigated this emotional turmoil, I decided to seek help. I began seeing a therapist, hoping to untangle the mess of my thoughts and feelings. With each session, I started to understand that my worth was not tied to my relationship or how others perceived me. I learned to value my own voice and recognize the strength I had within. Through therapy, I also came to realize that my relationship with Mark was worth fighting for. I began to focus on what made us unique as a couple. Rather than comparing myself to Tara, I cherished the moments we shared, the connection we had built over time, and the love that had brought us together in the first place. One evening, after a particularly enlightening therapy session, I felt a sense of clarity. I knew I needed to have an open and honest conversation with Mark again. This time, it would be about the steps we could take to strengthen our relationship and navigate the challenges we faced together. When I approached him, I expressed my desire to work on our relationship actively. I wanted us to create a partnership that celebrated our individuality while fostering the love we shared. I suggested we set aside time each week for just the two of us, free from distractions and outside pressures. I wanted to reinforce our bond and remind ourselves why we fell in love in the first place. As we talked, I could see the relief wash over him. He opened up about his own insecurities and how he had felt the pressure from my family as well. We began to see that we were both navigating a complicated emotional landscape. But together we could find our way through it. Slowly, the tension that had built up between us began to dissipate. We started to reconnect on a deeper level. And I could feel the love blossoming again. The doubts that had once plagued me faded into the background as we focused on building a stronger foundation together. With time, I learned to appreciate the unique qualities that made me who I was. I realized that I didn't need to compete with Tara or anyone else. I just needed to be myself. Our relationship flourished as we embraced our differences and supported each other through life's challenges. As I reflected on this journey, I felt a renewed sense of hope and purpose. I had confronted my fears and insecurities. And through that process, I had discovered the strength of our love. I was excited about the future we were building together and grateful for the lessons learned along the way. Looking back, I realized that love is not about perfection, it's about growth, understanding, and a willingness to stand by one another through thick and thin. As I embraced this new chapter in my life, I knew that I had the power to shape my own story and celebrate the love I shared with Mark. Free from the shadows of comparison,